Army veteran Joshua Curtis was spending the afternoon of April 24th, 2025 with his family at Main Beach Park in Fernando Beach, Florida. He was there with his wife, Barbara, their 6-year-old son Owen, and his young niece. The day was warm and clear, and the family had settled their spot along the shoreline, searching for fossilized shark teeth and enjoying the sound of the surf. Joshua, who was 38 years old, was relaxed and smiling. He was tossing bits of wet sand aside while helping Owen sift through shells and debris. It was a calm moment far removed from the life he had once known as a decorated combat veteran. He had served over 15 years, including tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. With the 101st Airborne Division, he had been awarded both the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. After retiring from service, he returned to Halifax, Massachusetts, where he coached youth football and spent his days raising his son. He endured violence, pressure, and responsibility most would never know. But that day, none of it mattered. He was just a dad enjoying the beach. While Joshua and Barbara sat in the sand, Owen and his cousin ventured slightly deeper into the water. The ocean didn't look dangerous, and the waves weren't really high, but an invisible rip current had formed. These narrow bands of fast-moving water can appear without warning and pull even strong swimmers away from shore in seconds. The children didn't stand a chance. One moment they were playing, and the next they were being dragged out to sea, with salt water filling their mouths as they kicked and thrashed and tried to scream, but the water just kept coming. Their heads would slip under and then bob back up, with panic settling in instantly. Joshua didn't hesitate. He leapt from the sand and sprinted into the ocean, diving through the surf. The current hit him hard and fast. His legs kicked against it, and his arms fought through every wave. The salt would burn his throat and sting his eyes, but he kept going. He would reach Owen first. The boy was coughing and flailing, and Joshua would pull him up. Then he reached for his niece and managed to grab her too, wrapping one arm around her while keeping Owen in the other. Now he was holding both children, with the current still trying to pull him under. The ocean surged and crashed against his chest and face. Salt water slammed into his nose and mouth, forcing its way down his throat every time he gasped. He tried to turn his body to shield the kids, using himself as a barrier, and his arms shook, but he kept lifting them. Every time they slipped, he grabbed tighter, even as the current dragged all three of them further from land. The physical side of drowning is quite hellish. It begins with water burning your throat and rushing into your mouth. You try to cough, but inhale more. Your body panics, your airways seize shut, and you kick even harder. But the ocean pulls even stronger. Your lungs beg for air you can't get, and you stay awake through all of it, feeling everything. Then your throat finally opens, and water floods into your lungs. Suffocating turns to flooding while your vision fades. Your limbs go numb, and you start to slip away, but not quickly. It's slow, it's violent, and it hurts the entire time. Joshua was enduring all of it, while still holding the kids up. His body was failing, his lungs were filling, and his muscles were obviously burning. But his focus was on keeping them alive. Every wave that slammed into him hit them too, and he absorbed it. He twisted, he kicked, lifted, and pulled. He was dying and still trying to save them. The emotional weight made it even worse. He knew he wasn't going to make it. He even told Owen he was drowning, so he obviously knew that he wasn't going to make it. He knew that he was about to leave his wife without a husband and his son without a father. He knew his niece would carry the memory of this forever. A nearby man named Lance Jones had seen what was happening and rushed into the water. He reached Joshua and took Owen from his arms. As he did, Owen cried, "My dad said he's drowning." Jones turned back and started to swim the boy toward shore. Another beachgoer reached the niece and helped her in as well. The children were coughing, vomiting seawater, and sobbing when they made it to land, but they survived. Barbara was screaming. She couldn't see Joshua. The crowd on shore scanned the waves, and he was gone. Lifeguards dove into the water and found him face down, unmoving, drifting near the break. When they pulled him in, his skin was pale and cold, his lips purple, and water was still leaking from his mouth and the nose. They rolled him onto his side and began CPR. His chest was compressed with enough force to break his ribs. More water and foam poured out. A second responder gave mouth-to-mouth, forcing in air as his lungs tried to push it back out, with Barbara just standing a few feet away, holding Owen, screaming his name again and again as they worked on him. They didn't stop for over 10 minutes. His body bounced with every compression, his chest rose from rescue breaths, but there was no response. They did load him onto a stretcher soaking wet and limp, with sand stuck in his face and arms, and rushed him to a Baptist medical center. In the ambulance, medics kept going. They inserted their breathing tube, and they gave him injections. His pupils were fixed, and his heart never restarted. At the hospital, trauma doctors tried again. More compressions, more drugs, defibrillator shocks, flatline again, nothing. The doctor eventually checked his pupils one last time and called it. Nurses cleaned his body, peeled away the soaked fabric, and wiped salt water from his skin. His lungs were basically still full of seawater. In the waiting room, Barbara waited for the news she already knew that was coming. A GoFundMe raised thousands to support Barbara and Owen. Strangers wrote things like, "I never knew him, but I'll never forget what he did." News outlets called him a hero, and others called him a father who made the ultimate sacrifice. But to the people who were there was no debate. On a cool, dry afternoon in September 2021, Robert Pratt was working alongside his brother just outside Chenia, Wyoming. The two of them were finishing repairs on a worn-down ATV they'd spent the last couple weeks fixing. They'd replaced the chain, fitted new tires, cleaned the carburetor, and bled the brakes. It was peaceful for him, predictable and controllable. He liked making broken things work again. That day felt like progress. The engine was finally running, the wheels spun smooth, and the brakes responded well in the driveway. The sky was clear with the wind gentle. The worksite sat on open property, bordered by fields that rolled into the Wyoming horizon. Behind the house was an uneven patch of prairie, dips, old fence posts, and a few low hills. It wasn't a trail, but they'd used it before for test rides. The utility poles that ran along the southern stretch had always been there, standing like skeletons against the sky. Robert decided to take the ATV out for a test run, just to see how it would handle under speed. His brother would call after him to be careful. He nodded, already gripping the handlebars, already easing the throttle forward. The engine buzzed louder as he pulled away, kicking up dust. He coasted down the gentle slope behind the property and looped around. Then, as he reached the base of a shallow rise, he accelerated a little too fast. There was a split-second misjudgment. The brakes didn't catch fast enough, maybe the rear tires lost grip in the loose dirt. Whatever the case, the ATV didn't slow down. It rocketed forward, bouncing violently as it hit a hidden rut in the ground. Robert tried to steer, but the machine launched, just briefly before it slammed into a wooden utility pole at full speed. The sound was horrifying. The front of the ATV crumbled on impact. The handlebars snapped inward with bone-crushing force, crushing against Robert's chest before his body was thrown forward. His head struck the top bar with a sickening crack. His body hit the dirt a split second later, rolling once before going still. His brother heard the crash from the yard, and at first he thought maybe the engine had backfired, but when he didn't start it again, a chill ran through him. He jogged down the incline calling Robert's name, and when he spotted the overturned ATV against the pole, his stomach dropped. Robert was lying several feet from the wreck, face down with one leg twisted grotesquely. There was a lot of blood, thick, dark, soaking through his shirt and pooling into the dirt. As Matthew knelt beside him, Robert stirred faintly, letting out a low gurgling moan. Blood was pouring from his mouth and his nose. He rolled onto his side, instinctively coughing, and when he did, a sudden forceful jet of blood sprayed from his mouth like vomit. His lips were literally turning blue. His brother tried to speak to him, voice shaking, but Robert couldn't reply. He blinked disoriented, and his breaths came in panicked, basically wet gasps, each one sounding more like drowning than breathing. Blood streamed down from his nose and filled his throat, bubbling every time he tried to exhale. Matthew would obviously call 911 with trembling fingers, screaming at the dispatcher for help. As he knelt down to Robert, he saw a jagged piece of rib poking under the skin just below the left side of his chest. The shape kind of looked like it was pushing out as if trying to burst free. Blood kept coming out of his nose, his mouth, and seeping from a tear in his abdomen that soaked the ground. His eyes rolled back slightly with his hands twitching. It took nearly 17 minutes for the ambulance to arrive, but by then Robert was slipping in and out of consciousness. His chest made rattling sounds like something gargling underwater. His body was going cold, and at one point, he gripped Matthew's hands, fingers twitching and weak, with his fingernails dark with blood, where he had tried to dig them into the dirt to crawl just after the crash. His shirt had ripped up, revealing massive bruising across his ribs, spreading like a storm cloud down his side and wrapping around his back. His breaths were shallow, erratic, and painful. Every few seconds he tried to breathe in, only to choke on the fluid in his lungs, quite literally drowning from the inside. The EMTs slid a chest tube in to try to relieve the pressure, with blood immediately gushing out in a warm, thick stream that coated the paramedics' hands and soaked through the gauze. They suctioned what they could from his lungs, but the bleeding was so intense that they couldn't clear his airway fast enough. His pulse became barely detectable, and then they raced him to the hospital. Inside the trauma room at this hospital, it only got worse. His spleen was ruptured, liver torn, and the punctured lung had collapsed completely. Several ribs had broken and stabbed inward, with the internal bleeding being so catastrophic every time they tried to transfuse more blood, it leaked into the chest cavity or down his throat. He was going into shock. His oxygen levels were so low his fingertips had already turned purple. The trauma surgeons opened up his chest in a desperate attempt to clamp the bleeding. The surgical team worked for over an hour, cutting, suctioning, clamping, and ventilating. His heart stopped once, they shocked him, he came back, but just barely. Then his pressure dropped again. His stomach was swelling from internal fluid buildup, and his eyes, still open, were fixed and cloudy. The ATV was destroyed, its frame bent like it had been folded in half. There was hair and blood on the left handlebar, and the pole had a deep crack from the force of the collision. The crash site looked like a battlefield. There was no blood, there was no drugs, no alcohol, just a bad angle, loose earth, and a machine that no one had tested at speed. Robert had been wearing a helmet, but it wasn't strapped. It flew off during impact and landed 20 feet away, unscratched. Despite the paramedics' efforts to stabilize him, the trauma team's work at the hospital, the internal damage was just too severe. He had suffered a punctured lung, multiple broken ribs, internal bleeding from a ruptured spleen and lacerated liver, and a collapsed lung that filled rapidly with blood.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.